Okay, so why don't you just let me know on your end when you're set?
I'm ready.
You're ready? Okay, wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for your patience. We'll call the meeting to order. It's 6:33 on February 11th. This is our general meeting of the District 287 School Board. Welcome, everyone. My name is Regina Neville, and I am board chair. This meeting is back in a hybrid format. We have some people present in the District Service Center boardroom, and we have a number of our board members and staff members present virtually. Welcome to everyone. This meeting is live streamed on the District 287 YouTube channel. The meeting is also being recorded. The link will be posted on the District 287 website in the school board section. The public is always invited to share their thoughts and comments with the board. If anyone would like to share comments, please complete the virtual meeting request form for written input that is available on the 287 website in the school board section. Comments received by 4:30 p.m. on the day of the board meeting will be read at the beginning of the meeting. And I'm going to invite all of us who are present in the boardroom to please move microphones a little bit closer so that our voices can be picked up well, and to try to speak clearly. And since we are still in a partially virtual format, all votes will continue to be taken by a roll call vote. And at this time, I'm going to invite board member Sam Sant to read the mission for District 287. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you, Chair Neville. The mission of Intermediate District 287 is to be the premier provider of innovative specialized services to ensure that each member district can meet the unique learning needs of its students.
Thank you. And at this time, would our clerk, Crystal Brackey, please call the roll for board members?
Andreessen.
Here.
Regina, would you like people to introduce themselves as well?
Yes, thank you. And it's a good reminder when your name is prompted, since we can't all see where each of us are seated and our tiles are rearranged on the camera. When Crystal calls your name, please introduce your first and last name and the district that you represent. Thank you.
Okay, Shannon, we'll go back to you.
Okay, thanks. Shannon Andreessen, Hopkins Public Schools.
And I'm Crystal Brackey from Richfield Public Schools. Casey.
Ann Casey, St. Louis Park Public Schools.
Keene.
Andrea Keene, Wayzata Public Schools.
Dallas.
Ruthie Dallas, Brooklyn Center Community Schools. I was going to say 286.
Kuntz.
From Orono Public Schools.
Marty.
Hi, Heidi Marty here from West Tonka Public Schools.
Mosqueda Jones.
Hi, Jackie Mosqueda Jones from Osseo Area Schools.
Neville.
Hi, I'm Regina Neville, and I represent Edina Public Schools.
Sant.
President, my name is Sam Sant. I'm representing Robbinsdale 281.
Seidel.
Adam Seidel, representing Eden Prairie 272.
Excellent. Welcome, everyone. I'd also like to welcome our staff members who are with us this evening. With us tonight, we have Amanda Echterkirk, Ann Becker, Annie Mitty, Ben McGrath, Chad Maxa, David Vandenboom, Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, Jonathan Voss, Julie Correa, May Hawkins, Melissa Bratting, Michelle Axel, Rachel Hicks, Radius Guess, Superintendent Sandy Lewandowski, Tanya Allen, and Juanine Denson Mgini. Are there any staff members I may have accidentally missed? All right, welcome. I'm going to walk through this evening's agenda. We have a regular consent agenda. We do also have a share the success and recognition with a couple of different items, introduction to the Superpower Storytelling campaign and a Northern Star online video, as well as recognition of Dr. T. Haupt being awarded a Lifetime Achievement Award. We have a superintendent's report with a vaccine update, an article that will be presented by Radius Guess. There's an instructional report on bilingual assessments and SEALs. Our business services and labor relations report includes an action item from the Human Resources Department regarding recruitment and retention strategies. Under board business, there is a chair report where we will be taking action on the superintendent's contract for the 2021-22 school year, and then we'll close with some information. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, I move that we accept the agenda. Is there a second?
Ruthie Dallas.
Thank you. Ruthie seconds. And Crystal, would you please call the roll for the acceptance of the agenda as presented?
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey. Aye. Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Next up is the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anyone would like removed for separate consideration? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved,
Michelle
Heidi
Coons?
Marty.
Oh,
Moved by Heidi Marty and seconded by Michelle Coons. Thank you. And Crystal, would you please call the roll for acceptance of the consent agenda?
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey. Aye. Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. Juanita, are there any audience members who would like to share any comments this evening?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on with Share the Success, and we'll begin with an introduction to the Superpower Storytelling Campaign. And Superintendent Lewandowski, can you share a little background?
First, I'm going to invite Rachel Hicks to explain that background and introduce this topic.
Thanks, Sandy. So as you can imagine, the pandemic has made it more challenging to tell the stories of our students and their families. And so we've started a new campaign to center their voices, for them to be able to share their successes even through the pandemic with all of you and our stakeholders and all of our publics. But before I introduce the campaign, I just want to share a little bit about the evolution of storytelling in District 287 by sharing a story with you, a true story. And some of you may remember this from a few years ago, when we had a group of students from West Education Center build a tiny house. And I want to share this story with you because I think it's important to recognize that, you know, I consider myself a storyteller in my profession. And as a white woman, I also have to be conscious about the lens that I have when telling the stories of other people, especially other people who come from different racial backgrounds than myself. And the filter that happens when stories come from the voices of other people through me, through my voice, and through my mind. So back to West Education Center. We wrote this great press release. We had news stations out. Channel 12 local station came out and did what I thought was this great story on our students. We probably showed it at our board meeting. A couple days later, I got an email from the teacher of the students that had built the tiny house. I'm going to read it to you. He said, "Hi all, I think we should be careful about how we refer to the kids here at WEC, and we should pass that message along to any media members that pick this story up. The Channel 12 news story was shown to some of our kids here, And as soon as they heard the reporter use the phrase 100 special education students from West Education Center, they were annoyed and frustrated, and they commented that they would not want their names or their pictures associated with that special education student label. Just something to be aware of moving forward. And this was pretty impactful to me to receive that message. And I spent some time reflecting and recognizing. And I think back to writing that press release and framing the story. And in my mind, I thought I was well-intentioned. I thought, this is a great beat the odds story, right? Beat the odds, or rags to riches story. And since then, I've really come to understand how dangerous that narrative can be, because it perpetuates the myth of meritocracy instead of acknowledging the systems of oppression that keep people down. So through this evolution, I want to share this story because I think it's important to recognize that this new campaign does center the voices of our students, center the voices of our families and our staff, and asking them to be the storytellers of their own stories instead of being filtered through other people or other systems. So the Superpower campaign is super sensational staff and students succeeding in school. And it's really about, like, a lot of our superpowers, or those things that are wonderful about us, can be invisible, but really wanting to see them and expose them and bring them to the surface. And so we're asking our students and our parents and caregivers and guardians and grandmothers and family members and our staff and all of you to help tell your stories about the successes that you are seeing and experiencing firsthand in District 287. And last year, we had this spotlight campaign where each board member, we had a site that was featured where we had a student come. And while we're still in a virtual setting, we're asking people to submit their own stories through video and through writing. So then now for the remainder of the school year, we at our board meetings will bring these stories to you and help share their stories directly through them. So that's what I wanted to introduce tonight. The next item on the board agenda is the very first submission from a student from NSO. So before we move to the next item, do you have any questions about the focus of this campaign or what you can expect to see or hear?
Thank you, Rachel. I do remember the tiny house and how impressed I was, and I appreciate the background that you shared about the students and their right to own their own story. Are there any questions or comments for Rachel?
I have a quick comment. This is Andrea. I just want to thank you, Rachel, and kind of reflect a little bit on the progress that we're making, and how it used to be that you would have to be very careful to not say special ed kids. You would say kids who receive special services, or kids who are in special ed. And that was a good thing, but it's even better now to imagine not putting those labels on at all and letting them tell their stories with their own voice. And by sharing that story with us, which probably took some courage, you're helping all of us be better. So thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Additional questions or comments? All right. Rachel, would you like to introduce the next segment with Northern Star Online? I do want to welcome David Vandenboom, our NSO principal. So welcome.
Thanks, David, for being here. I'll just hand it right off to you.
All right. So I know with the pandemic, things have been pretty tricky. And kind of new learning all around. Probably the most exciting for us at NSO is the amount of positive feedback that we now receive. So I think it's been really amazing, particularly this school year, just the amount of people that reach out on their own without being asked and are expressing great things about the school and the program. And so the video that we're about to see is one of the students, and the student is attending Robbinsdale Armstrong. So they are from there. So maybe we'll play the clip and then we can ask any questions. I will say that at this point, I think we're getting probably 5 to 7 responses or emails from parents just thanking us and saying how awesome the program is a week, which has never happened before. So I think that is unprecedented and really positive outcome from our school. And I think Juanine has the video.
Yep, 1 second.
Teacher policy.
It starts right away.
This is a good opportunity to thank our tech support team. And there are several of you working with tonight's board meeting. And I know that many of you aren't necessarily going to be seen and you're doing your work behind the scenes, but thank you. I don't want to dismiss how complex it is to do the work that we're doing. But well, the work that you are all doing makes our work possible. So thank you.
Sorry, we're going to get feedback if I play it, so I'm going to go right here and play it. Okay.
Oh, thank you. You know, while we're working out the tech, and I don't know if Juanine can still hear us, but I'm wondering if we can just move forward to item 4.3. So Annie Mitty, you're here, welcome. We can certainly recognize Dr. Tina Hauk while we're waiting for the video to be worked out. Annie, is that something that you're ready to do at this point while we're holding?
I'd be happy to and honored to do so. Thank you, Madam Chair. And hi, board members and staff members and audience watching. I am very honored to be here to share. I nominated with my colleagues, the school psychologists in the district, we nominated Tina for a Lifetime Achievement Award, and I'm proud to share with you the nomination. Tina was a strong advocate for students, families, and school psychology. She worked as a school psychologist and special ed director in the West Metro area for many years. We were fortunate to have her leadership for 7 years at District 287 as the Director of Special Education and Mental Health Partnerships. Tina was devoted to ensuring students' mental health needs were addressed by working tirelessly to remove barriers to service. She supported increasing school psychology services in our district and advocated for expanding our role beyond test and place to consultation, collaboration, crisis response, and beyond. Tina was admired for her commitment to administering programs and services in a way that always centered student needs. She placed student outcomes at the top of her list of priorities. Tina's legacy lives on in practitioners who knew her as we fight to center best practices and to improve the lives of all students. I am actually a member of the board of the Minnesota School Psychologists Association, so I speak with just great honor to say that as a board member, we are honored to bestow this nomination on Tina, and we just send our love and our gratitude to Greg and the kids and to everyone here who knew her. Thank you for this time.
Annie, thank you. Applause in the boardroom. And virtual applause. Dr. Hauk was amazing. And it is such a pleasure to use her full title of Dr. Hauk, because she earned her doctorate degree while working full-time and serving 287, while being a full-time parent to her 3 little children, and while battling the disease that ultimately overtook her. And I have the utmost admiration for her and gratitude for all that I learned from her, for how I became a better board member by learning how we can better serve students because of Tina's work. So thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to share a comment or possibly ask a question? Okay, thank you. Thank
I
you,
just wanted
Annie.
to say thank you to Annie for being here and for, submitting the nomination and reading it to us in a way that, I think we all feel the emotion and are in it with you. And so just wanted to acknowledge that and appreciate you for being with us tonight.
Thank you. Any other comments? Thank you, Annie. And I don't know if we are ready to circle back to the video.
Yes, we're ready.
We're ready. Thank you.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and watch the NSO video. So we're seeing what we can figure out about sound. So thanks everyone for your patience.
It is a really great speech.
I got so excited because I thought that was the student's voice for a second. You got my hopes up.
I did too.
Juanine is on mute.
So, Madam Chair, they're gonna upload it to YouTube so that it will come through and we can show it at the end of the meeting.
So thank you. And there's always another strategy. So we're going to try uploading it to YouTube and presenting it that way. We'll circle back at the end of the meeting. David, I hope that's all right for you. Does that work all right? Thank you. I appreciate you being here and thanks for your patience. So with that, we're just going to continue to move forward. Next up is item 6, the superintendent's report. And I'd like to welcome Radius guests and information on a vaccine article regarding BIPOC views on racial equity and vaccinations. Radius, welcome.
Hello, everyone. I'm hoping that you all had a chance to read the article. And so when I took a look at that article, it just meant for me that I needed to get some things out of my head. And so I prepared a little presentation. It's a PowerPoint that just kind of spoke to me as I was reading the article and taking a look at what I perceived to be some very startling statistics about COVID-19 and the vaccine and people of color, BIPOC individuals. And so I just want to share my screen and share my presentation with you. And then love to have a few minutes with you, just a bit of a conversation afterwards. So give me a moment to pull up my screen. Yep. And so, Madam Chair, can you let me know that you see my slide?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Okay, hold on. I think I hit the wrong button. See, I'm having technical difficulties as well.
Just blame it on the cold.
Okay, there we go. Madam Chair, can you see the slide?
Not yet. It did come back for just a moment and then it went away again. So not yet.
Oh, okay. Because I'm looking at it, but you can't see it.
No, not yet.
Okay. Is it there now?
No.
This is too much. Okay, 1 second.
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Can you still see it?
It looks like it might be loading. It's not present. It's a dark screen.
And nothing yet?
Not yet.
Oh, shucks.
Wait, okay, now it's back.
Okay.
So is this a PowerPoint?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and sometimes, well, it's here. So let's try moving forward.
Okay. So you do see the slide?
We do right now, yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm going to talk with you about racial and historical trauma in the healthcare system and allow you to draw conclusions as to why BIPOC and other historically marginalized members of the community might fear the COVID-19 vaccination. So I hope that you had a chance to view the article that I shared at the last board meeting Early state vaccination data raises warning flags for racial equity. The article for me provided the latest data on COVID-19 vaccinations by race and ethnicity. According to the state data, vaccination patterns by race and ethnicity appear to be at odds with who the virus has affected the most. So after reading the article, I conducted some of my own research and wanted to share my findings with you. So in my presentation, what I'm hoping to do is to revisit the medical history of abusing marginalized communities, provide an opportunity to understand what trust and distrust in the medical field means to BIPOC communities. I really want us to remember our shameful past and to find strength and healing that is holistic and resilient. And like Resma would say, this is an opportunity for you to get your reps in. So some of the key words and themes that you'll hear from me during this presentation is trust and distrust, physicians and the medical profession, African Americans, Jews, and other marginalized groups, and of course, racial and historical trauma. I kind of thought it would be a really good idea to establish some group norms for this conversation. So 287 does a really good job of creating brave spaces to discuss race-based conversations so that we can learn and also experience vulnerability. I'm here to say that I really believe that you may not agree with everything that I'm going to be saying, but I do ask that you lean in and lean into the discomfort and lean into each other for support. I do encourage you to commit to non-closure, and that I'm very certain that some of the things that I'm going to say for you, you will want to do some research on your own. So that I therefore ask that you assume positive intent and that you seek intentional learning. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about racial and historical trauma. And I really, in my research, went from 1840 all the way to 2021. So that's about 100 years. Actually, it's about 111 years to be exact. So I'm going to introduce some individuals to you that you may have heard about, or maybe this is going to be very new information to you. We'll talk about Dr. James Marion Sims. We'll talk about the Tuskegee syphilis study, the Nazi experimentation on Jews, Henrietta Lacks, and then we'll also end our conversation with the COVID-19 testing and vaccinations 2020 to 2021. Meet Dr. James Marion Sims, 1840. The reason that Marion was significant to me was because he's the father of modern gynecology. In 1876, he was the president of the American Medical Association. 1880, he was the president and co-founder of the American Gynecological Society. But what's really interesting for me was that he conducted research on enslaved African American women without anesthesia. They were medical test subjects. He cared more about the experiments than in providing therapeutic treatment. He operated under the racist notion that Black people did not feel pain. So this is one of many examples that I will share with you of racial and historical trauma in the healthcare profession. The next person I'd like to introduce you to is Sir Francis Galton. I was so impressed with this guy, and I think you will be as well. So Sir Francis Galton was brilliant. He was a statistician, a sociologist, a psychologist. I mean, his accolades go on and on and on. I was very impressed by the fact that he was knighted by King Edward in 1909. Galton's eugenics was a program to artificially produce a better human race through regulating marriage and procreation. His work is associated with Nazi Germany and the Holocaust. At the Nuremberg trials in 1945, Nuremberg defendants attempted to justify their human rights abuses by claiming that there was little difference between the Nazi eugenics and the United States eugenics program. Sir Francis Galton. This one I'm sure that you remember. This is officially called the Tuskegee Study of Untreated Syphilis in the Negro Male. The federal government oversaw an experiment in which about 400 Black men with syphilis were deliberately left untreated so doctors could study the disease. And this was from 1932 to 1972, so about 40 years. So in order to track the disease's full progression, researchers provided no effective care as the men died, went blind or insane, or experienced other severe problems due to their untreated syphilis. The last participant in this study died in 2004. That was only 17 years ago. So for 40 years, between 1932 and 1972, the United States Public Health Service followed hundreds of poor Black men in Tuskegee, Alabama, the majority of whom had syphilis, for the stated purpose of understanding the natural history of the disease. These men were denied highly effective treatment for their condition and were actively discouraged from seeking medical advice from practitioners outside of the study. They were subjected to blood draws, spinal taps, and eventually autopsies by the study's primary white medical staff. Survivors later reported that study doctors diagnosed them with bad blood, for which they believed that they were being treated. Compensation for participation included hot meals, the guise of treatment, and burial payments. This guy I really like. This guy is Peter Buxton. He was the whistleblower. He's a former United States public health official, investigator of venereal disease. So when he found out about the study, he expressed his concerns to his superiors that it was unethical. So in response, the officials formed a committee, which is what we do. We can form a committee. So they formed a committee to review the study, but ultimately decided to continue with the study with the goal of tracking the participants in the syphilis study until all had died. Autopsies were performed and the project data could be analyzed. Buxton decided that he would take it a step further. So he decided to leak the study to a friend who passed it on, and he passed it on to a fellow reporter, Gene Heller of the Associated Press. Heller broke the story in 1972. It was actually in July of 1972, prompting public outrage and forcing the study to finally shut down. So here's what the Associated Press cartoon looked like. It says, now we can give him penicillin. This slide represents how the press responded to the leak. What you might not be able to see is a sign at the foot of the patient's bed, and it says, ignore this patient, experiment in process. This patient has syphilis, ignore this patient, experiment in progress. In 1997, President Clinton apologized for the Tuskegee experiment. So what I would like to do is say their names. Herman Shaw, Fred Simmons, Charles Pollard, Frederick Moss, and Carter Howard. So to foster racial healing, there was a 1997 apology, and the apology stated, the United States did something deeply profoundly and morally wrong. We can also take a look at the Nazi medical experimentation. A lot of those experiments that occurred during the Holocaust were with children. Nazi physicians and their assistants forced prisoners, and again, many of them were children, into participating. They did not willingly volunteer, and no consent was given for the procedures. Typically, the experiments were conducted without anesthesia and resulted in death, trauma, disfigurement, or permanent disability, and such are considered as examples of medical torture. You might not know about the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. Very impressed with who she was, but not so impressed with what occurred, what happened for her. An African American woman whose cancer cells are the source of the HeLa cell line, the first immortalized human cell line and one of the most important cell lines in medical research. So Lax was the unwitting source of these cells from a tumor that was biopsied during treatment for cervical cancer at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. An immortalized cell reproduces indefinitely under specific conditions. The HeLa line continues to be a source of invaluable medical data of this day. Tissue samples from her tumors were taken without her consent during treatment of these samples, which were then subsequently cultured into the HeLa cell line. Henrietta Lacks. As late as 2018, the March of Dimes, they did a study, and their study showed that Black women are more likely than white women to experience discrimination, receive substandardized medical care, undergo unnecessary surgeries such as hysterectomies. The study also said that even if Black and white women have equal socioeconomic status, insurance coverage, and healthcare access, Black women will still get lower quality care. Resma talks in our year of learning, he talks a lot about healing from trauma. He states that we have to recognize, accept, move through the pain in order to experience what he calls clean pain. So you might be asking, what is clean pain? Some of you may recall in chapter 2 of Resma's book, My Grandmother's Hands, he describes clean pain and dirty pain. Clean pain is the pain that mends and can build capacity for growth. It's the pain you experience when you know exactly what you need to say, what you need to do. When you really, really don't want to say or do it, and when you do it anyway. It's also the pain you experience when you have no idea what to do, when you're scared or worried about what might happen, and when you step forward into the unknown anyway with honesty and vulnerability. Experiencing clean pain, according to Resma, enables us to engage in our integrity. Clean pain hurts like hell, but it enables our bodies to grow through our difficulties, develop nuanced skills, and mend our trauma. Our bodies can then settle, make more room for growth in our nervous system. But there's also something called dirty pain. Dirty pain is about avoidance, silence, blame, and denial. Here, you respond from your worst, wounded parts. You become cruel and violent, or physically or emotionally run away. You also create more and more dirty pain for yourself and others. Here, you prolong the pain. Resma talks a lot about manifestations of white dirty pain. We're learning about that in our year of learning and the reading of the book, My Grandmother's Hands. Here, this is the example that he provides us is talking, but not listening, denying other people's lived experiences. Why won't they take the vaccine? Why won't they go get tested? Jumping to statistics. What do the statistics say? Focusing on personal responsibility and individualism, equating experiences, avoidance, defensiveness. Those are the manifestations of white, dirty pain. But there's also something for healing. Healing for people of color. Learning and teaching about traumatic retentions and growing out of them. Learning and teaching about historical and intergenerational trauma. Learning and teaching about African history and cultures. Knowing where my name comes from. Knowing my name. Healing for white people, what does that look like? For white bodies, it's daring to stay silent. How dare we stay silent? Please, speak your truth. Recognize, acknowledge, and confront white privilege. Confront and challenge active acts of racism. Commit to being an anti-racist leader. There's a lot to be said about accepting the discomfort. So the historical and racialized trauma experience of our parents, our grandparents, our great and great-great-grandparents more than require that we share our personal truth with our family, our friends, our colleagues. I believe that this action helps us to begin the process of transforming the hearts and minds of our children, their children, and their children's children. I can't stress enough the importance of active listening, being open to the perspectives and experiences of others, and promoting racial healing and racial equity. I thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity to talk with you about a very important conversation that is taking place in our community, nation, and world. So if you don't mind, if you'll just allow me to just pause, think about, self-reflect for about 60 seconds before I open the floor for my colleagues and myself to respond to any questions that you might have. Just pause for a moment, please. When you feel the urge to push away the discomfort, don't. When your mind starts giving strategies for what to do next, don't grab onto them. Just sit with the discomfort. Remind yourself that any discomfort you feel is a protective response, not a defective one. Accepting, experiencing, and moving through the discomfort is the foundation of healing. Thank you for allowing me to give that presentation. It really just spoke to me after I took a look at the startling statements around what the demographic realities were for COVID-19 race and ethnicity, who's taking a vaccination, who is not. So I would love to invite my colleagues to join me in responding to any questions that you might have about the presentation or any of the statistics that you read in that report.
Thank you, Radius. That is powerful information. And I appreciate just having it as part of our board packet to take home and continue to revisit. Any questions or comments? Crystal, I see your hand raised. Go ahead, please.
Yep, and Michelle's is too. So
Thank you. I'm looking in, and just a quick board reminder, I'm looking in two places. So there's some people are using BoardBook Premier, and I believe some people are using Google Meet, and the screens aren't able to present side by side. So if it's easy for people to use Google Meet, since that's right in front of them, I'm going to ask that people maybe just consolidate to that raised hand. But thank you. Crystal, go ahead, and then Michelle, and I see Andrea and Shannon. So we'll just keep those hands up and we'll get to everyone. So Crystal, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Radius. And I don't know if this is a question for you or for others on the team, totally open to whomever wants to respond, but I'm curious if this is a similar conversation that is taking place or will be taking place with staff and students in terms of the moment that we're in and the issues that you, I think, really importantly brought forward for us.
Director Brackey?
Yes.
I did not hear a question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you for, my question was whether these are conversations that are going to be happening with staff and students as well.
I would say absolutely. I would say that these questions have already been taking place in many of our classrooms online with our students. Many of our staff have participated in professional development and training so that they are equipped and ready to have these kinds of conversations with their students.
I meant the conversation about the vaccines and the disproportionate health impacts in particular.
I can't speak to that. Any of my colleagues like to respond to that question?
Madam Chair, I do know this is a conversation that I've had with leaders and in conversation with their staff who work with them. I'm not clear if it's a specific area of discussion that has been brought forward with students, but I do know that it's been happening with leaders and staff.
Thank you. I will put my opinion forth, which is, I think some really important history that is relevant to this moment in time and the racial trauma that people are experiencing in addition to the pandemic makes me feel like this is something that feels very in line with the racial equity priorities of this district, which is why I asked the question. So I will just go ahead and share my opinion that I would like to see if, I think we're spending time on this as a board. We should make sure that this is something that's happening not just at our level in the district.
Thank you, Crystal. Next, we'll hear from Michelle Coons, and then that will be followed by Andrea, then Shannon, and then Ruthie. Michelle, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Radius, little did I know when I posed the question 2 weeks ago that you would come back with this wealth of information and history and incredible thought. I really want to thank you for that. it's a rare thing these days that people go back and look at history to explain things that are happening today, and sort of the idea that, will we never learn? So it's touched me deeply, and I really want to thank you for coming back to us with this incredible information and viewpoint. I really respect that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Kuntz. It was a very emotional presentation, and so it was a little hard to deliver it, but I did feel that it was a presentation that was necessary.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, as I'm sitting here, I goosebumps. So thank you.
Thank you. Andrea Keene, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Radius, for the presentation. I know not all the board members have had the opportunity to participate in the Year of Learning, but Michelle Kuntz, I want to compliment you on just pointing out your VIMBAs. You did a good job. And I just really appreciated those 3 bullet points at the end, Radius, and I hope you don't mind indulging me, letting me read it again, but I want to add one more sentence to the end, and I want everyone who knows Resma to imagine it in his voice. So I loved what you shared with us, which is when your mind starts thinking strategies, what to do next, don't grab onto them. Just sit with the discomfort. You are not defective.
Yeah. That's what Resma would say to us.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Andrea. Next, I'd like to welcome Shannon, and that will be followed by Ruthie. Shannon, go ahead, please. Shannon, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. It looks different on my iPad. Anyway, thank you for giving me space and time to talk, and I appreciated so much this presentation. It's so important that when we're thinking about healthcare that we consider that history, because it is stark and shameful. I was lucky enough to have the time to attend the presentation from NPR about disparities and distrust in BIPOC healthcare. And one of the things that one of the panel people shared with all of us was to also remember the history of how Native Americans and Indigenous people have with our government around health, in particular the vaccine and the ways in which healthcare very much is not delivered in that community in an equitable way, but also our government is responsible for spreading intentionally disease within that community. And so there's a lot of distrust there as well. And I would also urge my fellow board members to really dive deep into the legacy of Galton in this country. It is harrowing, and it touches deeply onto the community that 287 serves. So I would just, I thank you for bringing up that time, that movement. It still exists, and we still see the repercussions of that eugenics movement today in our healthcare. So amazing presentation. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Shannon. Ruthie, welcome. Your question or comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Radius, for a wonderful presentation. I think this was very timely, your presentation, because every day I hear on the media about the number of BIPOC indigenous people that are not getting the vaccine. And it keeps running through my mind some of the things we presented on. Is it due to that, or is it just a shortage, in the vaccination? And who's actually looking into this, and it's that repetitive talk about the number that are not receiving vaccination. And I think just as the community is high on doing something about the criminal justice system, the whole police reform and those things, the healthcare system is a system. It's long overdue as far as someone tracking and monitoring and seeing, doing more research around what's happening today. We know it happened in the past. How can we refute that it's not that? It's not this type of situation, again, similar to the Tuskegee experiment and so in other situations. And I don't know, I think the school system can play a part in this by actually getting the truth out, as others have said, as we're teaching histories. This is a very critical part of history that need to be taught. And how can we get it to not just teachers and staff, but students as well, and making people aware? I think it's what's happening is the youth is finding out the facts now, and that's what's building all of this trauma that exists, because they're searching for the truth, and it's been hidden so long. And how can we play a part in making it happen? And I think, like someone said, starting at the top, the leadership, Department of Health need to hear these kind of talks as well, how they're playing a part in this. And so I think it was just, I was sort of looking at what can we do. And so your presentation was right on spot on bringing out a lot of this history and actually stepping back and saying what kind of action can be taken. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Dallas.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruthie. Jackie, your question or comment, go ahead, please.
Radius, I just wanted to say thank you for the emotional work you put into this. It really means a lot. And I know that often that type of emotional work isn't appreciated. And so that's really, truly all I wanted to say, because it's important and needs to be said. So thank you for the emotional work you had to do to put this together. And for the emotional work for people to be listening to it and processing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam Sand, welcome.
I'm just gonna add a few comments just because of what the nature of this is and everything that's been said, but it's gonna be the proof in the pudding and how all this goes down and how it's treated as a society all the way to the micro level, I feel. Because I have the conversations all the time with my friends and my family, and half want to take it, half don't, for these exact same reasons. And within a few years ago, in Michigan, they've changed the water in a mainly black city and poisoned a whole community. And this happened in a few years ago. And now that we have this huge pandemic and vaccines come out to save everyone, my parents weren't brought up in this country, and they want to take it. My sisters, have lived here and brought up in this country, and they don't want to take it. And I feel that personally that it could be safe with a vaccine. But when you look at these statistics and the history that's happened to people of color and the diseases that have happened, and like I said, things have happened recently, especially with the criminal justice system and everything else that we can discuss, there's a lot of mistrust. And there's nothing that any of us can say. I don't want to be discouraging to overcome that. And it's going to have to take time and getting more power and the right people at the table and people that look like the rest of this country, at any level of government to sway that. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. It's something that's going to happen in the next few years, but it's a huge hill to get over, and it's going to take years, if not decades.
Thank you, Director Sands.
If you just double check your icons, there are a few raised hands that I think need to be cleared, which I cannot clear from Google Meet. But is there anyone else who would like to address a question or comment on this topic who has not had an opportunity to do so?
Madam Chair.
Yes, Sandy, go ahead, please.
I would just like to also thank Radius for her presentation. I think what we're trying to achieve is bringing in information that's both timely and is something we're experiencing in real time, I guess is another way of saying it. So I appreciate this. You can look forward to perhaps other items like this that come up that Radius seems to have a wealth of presentations and content to share. So we want to take advantage of that. And for new board members, we have a couple of books, one on trauma and Resma's book that we'll get to you that the board has either read or is reading now. So.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Radius, thank you.
My pleasure.
Very much appreciated. We will move on to item 7 on the agenda, which is bilingual assessments and seals. And I'd like to welcome Carlos Canal-Torres, the assistant principal. And is Marissa Rusi with us as well? Yes, welcome. Hello. I'm glad to have both of you here. And go ahead and share the information that you have regarding the bilingual assessments.
Okay, buenas noches, damas y caballeros. For those of you tuning in English, that means good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Carlos Canal-Torres, and I am the assistant principal for Northern Star Online and Teaching and Learning. It's a pleasure tonight, my pleasure to be able to introduce Marissa Rusi, our amazing EL coordinator, who's going to be speaking with you or to you tonight about the bilingual and multilingual SEALs project. And I remember about a year ago, Marissa coming to John Voss and myself with this big idea. She had an idea for a pilot, and it was really quite daunting. And after much conversation, I remember our noble and thoughtful and encouraging leader, John Voss, putting his hands together like this, and he said, "Make it so." And he did. As you listen to Marissa's presentation tonight, I would ask that you keep two things in mind. Number one, the students that Marissa is going to talk about are historically some of the most discrepant and isolated students in our school systems. And I mean racially, linguistically, socioeconomically. The barriers that they overcome are great in order to succeed. Second, I would ask you to keep in mind all of the work that we do around racial equity. There are two parts to that. Really, one is that philosophical aspect with people grappling and trying to wrap their minds around the impact of race and culture in our society. And the second part is really taking action. Taking these ideas and bringing them to fruition, for me, is equally as important as establishing that foundation, that philosophical part, and understanding that. And tonight, you all have an opportunity to see these two things come together. So with that, Marissa, dale, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here. Please just give me a moment. I'm going to share my window. I have a presentation for you that you can kind of follow along as well. Okay. Thank you, Carlos, so much also for that really kind introduction. As Carlos said, my name is Marissa Rusi, and I'm the English Learner Program Coordinator for the district, and I'm also an English Learner teacher at North Education Center. So I play both of those roles. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about these bilingual and multilingual seals. So this is a project that came out of the 2014 LEAPS Act. And the idea around bilingual and multilingual seals is supporting students who have a language other than English, whether that was learned in school or whether that is a native language that that student has. And so this has been around in theory since 2014. But it's been kind of slow moving for some districts and kind of getting the pieces together. And we are starting to bring this here to 287. So it's really exciting. And this assessment comes with a lot of different benefits for our students. So after students complete this assessment and receive a certain score or certain level, they receive high school language elective credits, quite a lot of high school language elective credits. Quite a lot of free Minnesota college credits for eligible schools in Minnesota, and that list is really long. A certificate of achievement, and then an award of recognition on their transcript stating that the student is bilingual or multilingual if they choose to take the assessment in multiple languages. So this assessment is available in a lot of different languages, and they just keep growing. I'm not going to read all the languages to you because you can see them there, but some of the kind of most salient ones for our district are Spanish, Somali, Hmong, ASL, and then some indigenous languages as well. So these assessments are available in all of these different languages listed here. And as I said, the more languages are in development, it feels like weekly I get an email saying that there's another language that's available for assessing students, which is so exciting. So this assessment is for high school students, 10th through 12th grade. In any program throughout our district. There are limited accommodations available, but trying our best to make this accommodating to every student who would be interested in taking this assessment. And then the other piece that's important is that this is a social language assessment. So in no way are we are asking students to produce mathematical terms in Hmong. We are asking social language. Can you have a conversation? Can you write an email? Could you translate something if someone needed support in translation? So that's really important there as well. And then this award, like I said before, goes on the student's transcript, and it's awarded when that student graduates. And then you can see here the level of award here. So the 4 years of high school language elective credit, 2 to 4 semesters of college credit, depending on how high the student scores. And then just a little piece there about English learners. And the really important piece here is that depending on what level students get, students can receive this assessment and receive this award without having a traditional diploma or without having graduated at all. So we can still give the certificate level, which is the lower level, but still comes with tons and tons of benefits to students who don't graduate still. And so that's important to know that this is open to all students who are interested in taking this assessment. One more thing I want to add here that I forgot to mention as well is something that's really important that I speak to students a lot about regarding this assessment is there are a lot of benefits even if your chosen path is not to attend college or post-secondary education, right? Having a certificate that says, hey, I'm bilingual in this language and in English is so beneficial for any job that students may want to go to, or just empowering for themselves, right? To have that recognition that their first language is really, really important to them, and that they have proficiency in that. So we piloted this program at North Education Center last year. 10 students registered, and we did it only in Spanish as the pilot. 8 students completed the assessment, and all 8 who completed the assessment scored high enough to receive this award, which is really, really exciting. And 6 of them received a certificate level, 1 a gold, and then 1 the highest, which was a platinum level there. And so this is one specific student from North Education Center, Marisol. She completed the assessment in Spanish and she was awarded that gold seal. She was allowed to graduate a quarter early by fulfilling those elective credits. That's all that kind of she had left to do. And so she received those college credits, an award, that certificate, and a transcript as well. Unfortunately, graduation was virtual, so it was a little bit harder to recognize her for her achievement, but going forward, we're really excited to recognize students and recognize graduating students as they get these achievements. So this is the plan going forward, and essentially the plan is to expand this to all of the different sites. So this year, this will be expanded to all of the different 287 sites. And the pre-developed languages, which are the languages that are already accessible to us, will be brought out to students. And then in the future, we'll consider adding more languages. And then eventually we'll have a full implementation kind of working system going at all of the different sites there. And then this is just a little COVID piece, but this year we're going to offer the assessments in May. And normally the plan is to offer this one time in the fall and one time in the spring so that students get an opportunity, whether they're graduating kind of at different times. You know, students are ALCs sometimes graduate at different times to take this assessment. But if a student needs it, we can give it to them at kind of at any time. There aren't those necessarily set dates. This can happen at any time up to our discretion. Okay, and then just a little note here, a lot of people contributed to supporting this project. And so I just wanted to say thank you. A lot of people on this call have supported as well, and people who may be watching have supported it. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has and continues to support it. And then I'll have time for questions now, but my email and phone number is also there. So if you would like to contact me at all to get more information, you absolutely can.
Yeah,
I'm gonna. Go ahead, Carlos.
I was going to say, perhaps before we get to questions, you know, on my way home, I was talking to my kids, Santiago and Catalina, who are 11 and 13, and I told them one of my favorite parts of this, of being a leader, is to have the opportunity to celebrate people's stellar work. You know, on behalf of our district's parents and kids, I just want to publicly thank Scott and Marissa for the work they've done. You know, they are two of the busiest people that I know. Nobody asked them to do this. They took the initiative and they willed this to the finish line. You know, this project, this works, really speaks volumes about the people you are as educators, as human beings. It speaks to your work ethic, and it really speaks to your personal values, which are directly aligned to our district. This system that you've established really will positively affect so many kids moving forward. And, you know, it acknowledges that these children have a gift, that they're bilingual or multilingual. I know it because I lived it. And for years, your culture or your first language often feels like a detriment. You feel like you're behind either academically or in life. But through this type of project, they will feel proud of being bilingual or multilingual. And I can assure you that this type of recognition, a bilingual seal, is or will be a big milestone in their lives. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge to everybody here, you have a part in this. This is the goodness that you are supporting through this partnership. And I thank you for that. Gracias.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to stop sharing just so that I can make sure I can see everyone okay. I see there's a few questions.
Carlos and Marissa, thank you so much. It's just an excellent presentation and another example of innovative work happening in our district. I'd like to invite questions and comments. I see a short handful. Ruthie Dallas, do you have a question or comment?
I'm sorry, I thought I had lowered my hand.
Nope, not a
But-
problem. Just wanted to
But
make sure.
anyway, I want to say thank you. Great presentation. And I had one question. Is it just for those that have language problems, language barriers, or can like African American Blacks participate in this if they're not an immigrant?
I'm sorry, Ruthie, my internet cut out right at the end of that question.
Can African American Blacks who are not immigrants, can they participate in this program?
So any student who has another language can participate in this program regardless of anything else.
Okay, so they have to speak another language to be a part of it. Okay, that's my question.
Yes, they do, yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll hear next from Andrea, who will be followed by Michelle Coons and then Adam Seidel. So Andrea, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Regina. Carlos and Marissa, thank you so much for being here. It's really exciting. I think I was just first elected to my school board when the LEAPS Act was passed. And I remember just being thrilled to think that it was coming down from the legislature that being bilingual, speaking another language was a strength and not a weakness. And that parents were given the message from the government that it's a good thing to talk to your kids and read the books in your native language, that it's going to be great for their education. So I think, Marissa, you're right. It's been kind of a slow rollout since then, but I'm really thrilled to learn about what you're doing at 287. And until the presentation tonight, I didn't realize that ASL was one of the possible second languages. So first of all, yay, that's really so cool. And my question is, given 287 and the great services we provide to students who are deaf, hard of hearing, is there any possibility of adding that to the plan in the future?
Thank you, Andrea. I can't answer that full question, and that is because ASL, that is a very, very expensive assessment to provide, the most out of the list, and that's just because it has to be done live, right, through recording with someone, so I can't speak to the kind of financial side of that, but it's something that I certainly hope will happen in the future.
I understand. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andrea. Next, we'll hear from Michelle Coons. Michelle, go ahead, please.
So Marissa and Carlos, thank you so much, very much for all this work that you're doing. And this is right at the heart of my being. I'm a translator, and I pride myself in having had the opportunity to learn 4 languages. I think it's high time that we recognize that just because a student is new to the country, that they are somehow deficient because nobody's paying attention to what they can do in their own language, their mother tongue. And I am just truly excited that these assessments are available, and the students can be so proud of themselves and get recognition that way as well. So thank you so much for all your hard work.
Thank you, Michelle. Next, we'll hear from Adam Seidel, to be followed by Crystal Brecky. So Adam, your question or comment?
Yeah, can you, you did a little bit in your presentation already, but can you go specifically through what, if a student goes through this process, what's it like from start to finish? Is it sort of, just a single assessment, or what's that like from start to finish, and what's that take?
That's such a wonderful question. Yeah. So the assessment itself takes 2 to 3 hours, and that's it. So the assessment is broken up into listening, reading, writing, and speaking, the four modalities. And so students can take that all in one sitting, or we can choose to break that up for them. How we did it at NEC was a half of a day. Students kind of took that assessment, took a break, and then took the last piece of it. And then after that, everything else is handled on the district's end as far as getting the transcripts notated, giving them the result, and all of those pieces. So students are just required to be in that assessment period, however long that takes them to finish the assessment.
Is there any? I'm not very familiar with the state law for this. What, like, do we have to go through hoops to get permission to administer these assessments in the first place through MDE or something like that, or is it just something that's available for all districts to do?
I can't speak to that question, Adam, but perhaps someone else here can.
Adam, could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, I just am wondering if there are hoops that districts have to jump through before we get to the point of offering the assessments for particular languages or things like that, or if it's just a matter of, you know, scheduling the assessments essentially and then offering this service for students.
Carlos, do you have an answer for that? Otherwise, we'll get that answer and get it out to you, Adam.
Yeah, there are many districts who are taking advantage of this. Those initial steps, I guess, Marissa, you know, essentially the key part was just the organization of it. So, you know, no special permission. It was literally just organizing the testing, the sessions, who would qualify, and then the finances around that. And so, I mean, that is the essential part. So many districts are taking advantage of this. And I think we're in a good place, getting ready to expand in that phase 2 and being able to offer this to all the students who qualify for District 287. We can certainly gather more information for you just in terms of that initial step and bring that forward if you're interested.
No, I appreciate it. I'll be honest. I hadn't heard of this program before, and I don't know if my home district is doing it or not. And so I wanted to pick up. It's a really good program. So I wanted to learn a little bit about it, and I have something to bring back home and talk about. So thank you.
Great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Next, we'll hear from Crystal Brackey. Crystal, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, the question started percolating in my head when I saw on the slide that some tests are $20 and other tests are $50. And then it became more urgent when I heard the response to the question about the ASL biliteracy test in particular. So I'm curious, who is bearing the financial burden of the tests, and what are we doing to ensure that finances are not actually a barrier for our students to be able to attain the seal of biliteracy?
Thank you, Crystal. That's such a good question. And I want to make really clear that we in no way are asking students ever to pay for any of these assessments themselves. So I want to make sure that we can understand that. For the NEC, for the pilot at North Education Center, that was covered, those assessments were covered by Teaching and Learning. Going forward, the cost of the assessment, that piece has not been decided yet on exactly where that financial piece is going to come from. So I can't speak to that yet. I can only say that that's being worked on, in that once we have an answer to that, we can certainly share more of that information.
Thank you. And Ruthie and Andrea, so you still have hands up. Do you have new questions or just a clear, maybe just need to clear?
I don't have any questions. How do I get rid of this raised hand?
Just click the hand another time, the icon.
Once more? I thought I did that. And it goes back to raise hand.
It keeps it on.
You're good, Ruthie. It's cleared now.
Oh, it is? Oh.
Yep.
Excellent. But don't hesitate to press it again if you have another question. So thank you so much.
I don't have
Carlos. We appreciate the presentation. This is good information. Okay, we will move on at this point to our Business Services and Labor Relations report. We have a Human Resources report. I'd like to welcome Amanda Achterkirk, our talent acquisition professional, to share human resource recruitment and retention strategies. Amanda, welcome.
Board Chair, welcome. This is Michelle Axel and board members. I'd like to introduce Amanda in this presentation. First, we're going to have Juanine share her screen and share our presentation on our behalf. And I'm smiling because I just want to say, I know how you will enjoy hearing about tonight, how Amanda has continued the recruitment efforts and how it's evolved and actually blossomed during this pandemic year. And so the title and this shift is from recruitment to branding. Next screen, thanks, Juanine. I'm not really the presenter. I'm just here to have that opportunity to introduce Amanda Octakirk, our talent acquisition professional, and share with you the outcomes that you'll receive to date. Go ahead and change the screen. So by the end of this presentation, the board will have an understanding of what I'm talking about as a recruitment to branding strategy to attract our external candidates committed to advancing the district's strategic priorities around racial equity and student outcomes specifically. You're going to hear about and understand the efforts to enhance and elevate the district's Grow Your Own program that we have currently. And for newer board members and even our current board members will be able to ensure that you have an understanding of the background and the success of the signing and retention bonus for licensed candidates. And at the end of this presentation, we'll ask for approval of this recruitment incentive for the 2021-22 year. Next slide, please. And with no further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over, and Amanda will take over. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks, Michelle. Thank you, board members, board chair. I am really, excited to be here tonight to talk to you all about this. This is really a passion project for me, and I'm excited to share a little bit about it. But something that I wanted to kind of call to attention that recently has been resonating with me a lot is the idea of kind of grounding ourselves in our purpose before we even talk about the work that we're doing. And so I actually pulled this quote straight out of our equity policy, but the pieces that I really wanted to highlight is not only the recruit and employ, but the support piece that we provide and need to provide to our staff. And also the last part of that sentence, which is reflective of our student population. And so as I speak and move forward in this, I just want to make that really clear. The goal here really is to reflect our student population and allow our students to see themselves in their instructional and support staff and leaders. Next slide, Wendy. So I will first start with just a snapshot. I just want to call attention to our current data. So we have staff and student data here on this slide. And the navy color in all three of these graphs is going to be representing our BIPOC population. And so on the left, we have our total BIPOC staff. And so that number is 28% of our total staff is currently BIPOC staff members. And if you break that down into further categories, it is in our licensed group, it's about 20%. And then in our non-licensed group, that's about 50%. So that's our EAs, our student safety coaches, interpreters, etc. In the middle graph, we have our student numbers, and that number is 60, it's over 60%. And so I think that's really important to note and see as essentially what I said before, which is a goal. And then just for some context around, the total big picture here is the BIPOC teachers within the Twin Cities. A report was recently published by Pelsby, and it's the Supply and Demand of Teachers in Minnesota report. And that is probably one of my favorite reports to read. And so this was published in that, and that 12% BIPOC teachers in the Twin Cities kind of struck me a little bit, because I don't know what I expected, but there it is. And so we'll move on into kind of the recruitment piece of this. So next slide, please. So just to point out some recruitment highlights, I do want to be very, very clear and kind of sensitive about the situation that we are all in at the moment, which is the fact that, all districts are going through a level of uncertainty when it comes to next school year. And I do want to be very sensitive and acknowledge the fact that we have some amazing staff currently. And in terms of recruitment, the way that I've seen this year has really been more of a shift to branding, because the recruitment effort and the way that we traditionally feel and talk about recruitment is recruiting to fill a position right now today. And that's not necessarily the case here. And so when we talk about branding, it's really positioning ourselves so that we're recruiting for the future and for future teaching years and school years, to ensure that we have people who are interested in us, not just this year, but next and the next after that. And so if we just take a look at what I call our external parts, right? The external recruitment highlights. The piece that's been really big to me is building relationships. And we say that to our teachers, we say that to our students, right? Relationships are everything. And so something really exciting that's happened this year is the #TeachInMN video series. This has come out of our partnership with Educate Minnesota. As you can see on the slide, this is the little, advertisement for the live sessions that we do. I've done 2 different video series so far, so I guess you could say that I'm famous. But so far we've gotten some good feedback about it, and they're continuing on. So districts from all over the state are doing this in partnership with each other. Obviously I did mine with 916, which is great because we have a really good relationship. And they're on all sorts of different topics, but in particular, we've been setting these up in preparation for a new job fair that's coming up at the end of February, in a couple weeks here. And that Education Minnesota partnership, or Educate Minnesota, sorry, partnership, Chris Hain is the founder of that. And we had a relationship with him previously, which led to this partnership. And many of the districts here are also founding district members of Educate Minnesota. And what they do is they attempt to kind of bridge the gap between our candidates, our teacher candidates, our districts, and our teacher prep providers, and figure out, how can we best find the right candidate for the right districts, or, talk to teacher preps and get their candidates directly to district more quickly and fill those needs a little bit better. And so these relationships have been really great from that standpoint. And another piece we were able to do with Educate Minnesota is actually attend an HBCU virtual fair. For those who may not know what that is, it's Historically Black Colleges and Universities. And we actually attended as a state representative. So there was a number of school districts that went. It was a virtual fair, so it was very easy to attend. And what came out of that kind of connection and attempting to do something like this together in a joint way is this kind of idea of what would it look like if, instead of districts attempting to recruit at HBCUs individually, what would it look like if we as a state were recruiting almost cohorts of teachers from different states? So that way they're not isolated. As we know, teachers often, they're more likely to leave the profession within the first 5 years. And if you are talking about a BIPOC teacher, that might be shorter. And a lot of the time it's that feeling of isolation. And so what would that look like if districts could work collaboratively, if the state could work collaboratively to pull teaching candidates from other states in a joint way? You know, another partnership that I wanted to mention is the U of M partnership, the College of Education and Human Development. I've had a really good relationship with the directors there for a few years, and I attend their resume days and their interview days because I just like to help students and teach in that way. And we have been able to develop some really great relationships with some teacher candidates, and this is at all age levels and licensure levels. So I've spoken with kinesiology majors in their freshman year. I had the pleasure of speaking with an OT student recently who had no idea that OTs even existed in schools. So that was a great surprise for me and her. And that connection kind of fosters, right? And so those pieces, when I do say building relationships with intentionality and authenticity, it's that connection that I'm talking about. That teacher may not be ready for us this year, and we may not be ready for her this year, but my goodness, when she graduates in 3 years, we continue that connection, and here you go. And then finally, I wanted to address our Pelsby partnership. So this is something that I personally have a lot of passion towards. When we talk about racial equity, it's, you know, we know that racial equity happens, or inequities, I should say, happen at a systems level a lot. And recruitment really happens not at the systems level. And a lot of the barriers that we face in recruitment of teachers specifically, those barriers exist at the systems level. And so what do we do about that? And this partnership with Pelsby has really allowed us to do systems work. We can talk about, you know, alternative pathways to teaching licensures with Pelsby in a different way than we can with each other. We've been able to talk about legislative issues, about how they're redoing their licensures and the tiers. We've had a lot of say in that. We had say in their strategic goals this year, which was really cool. And so essentially what I'm getting at in this entire slide is really the more that we can build the relationships and build the brand, which essentially is just putting a face and a personal experience to the District 287 name, it allows us to be at the table, to advocate for our students and for our teachers, and advocate at a systems level when it comes to increasing the teachers of color in Minnesota. And that's at a state level, and then also specifically for 287. But it's something that's affecting us all. So this is something that I find really, really important. All right, Lenny, we can go to the next slide. So as I move into I'm shifting away from the external side of the recruitment work and towards the internal. And again, the supply and demand report came out, and I love this report. So something that came out of that, and I would have done this slide as a trivia, but we don't have time for that. So I will give you a fun fact for tonight. You see the graph on the left. You can see again our BIPOC population is represented in that navy color, and that says 15%. I know it's really small. But the fun fact is, in the 18-19 academic year, 3,261 teacher candidates successfully completed a teacher licensure program in the state of Minnesota. Okay, so over 3,000. Of those completers, 85% were white, meaning we went from over 3,000 teachers completing in 18-19 to less than 500 that are BIPOC teachers for the state. And so this is something that I get passionate about because, again, we're back to systems. And also included in this report, which is really guiding where my effort and my purpose goes within recruitment and retention, is they also listed the number of baccalaureate level teacher prep provider programs in the state. And so for the 3 that I've listed here, for our emotional behavior, our autism spectrum, and our blind visually impaired, as we know, These are high areas for 287. These are areas we hire pretty much every year. For EBD, our emotional behavior, there are 0 programs at the bachelor's level in Minnesota, 0. There is 1 for ASD, and there is 0 for BVI, for blind visually impaired. But there are over 10 master's level programs for EBD and ASD, again, 0 for BVI. So these are the systemic barriers that we are facing right now. Not only do we not have access, but now we are asking our teachers to not only get a bachelor's degree, but to get a master's degree to then graduate and then start at the first level as a teacher in setting 4. And if you layer on race and limitations in access to education for BIPOC populations, it just gets worse. And so ironically, they also had the notably high demand list, and the only 4 licensure areas they listed are the ones I've listed on this slide. And I kind of had to laugh a little and go, well, I wonder why. So, you know, we are definitely in those high demand areas. So keeping this in mind, when we're talking about systems, what does this really mean for 287? What does this mean for us, for all of us, really? It shifts our perspective, and it shifts our perspective just slightly. So I'll go into the next slide, please. And where this shifts is the importance of grow your own. And if we can't have systemic programs that are going to, you know, create new teachers for us every single year at bachelor's levels, at attainable levels for students that is going to be realistic for them, or just in general, then it looks like we'll just have to create our own. And so this shift in mindset is really something that I've been really passionate about as well. And so one of the things that we do is our Grow Your Own program with West Metro Partnership, and that one allows us to create special ed teachers from within our organization. And so currently we are excited to have 7 new student teachers this upcoming spring, through the West Metro program, which is great, which means they're that much closer to licensure and working in our classrooms on a full license. And out of those 7, 57% are BIPOC candidates, so that's really great as well. If we can get that in a larger volume, we're just going to be, you know, making magic here. If we look on the right-hand side of this, the blue circles are going to represent our special permissions group. And that's our tier 1, our tier 2, and our out of field. And if you're not familiar with the different licensure levels, tier 1 and tier 2 are not licensed teachers. They are not fully licensed yet. Our out of fields are licensed teachers, but that are teaching outside of their licensure area. So for example, I might be a math teacher, but I'm on an out of field permission teaching in EBD. And so those numbers, we have tier 1 and tier 2 teachers. 68% of them are internal staff, which is a really good number to be growing up through. It allows us to engage our EAs, our education assistants, in a different way than other districts typically can. Because what that allows us to do is give not only an opportunity to an amazing EA who already knows our students, who already knows the ins and outs of special ed, to be able to teach, but it also maintains consistency in the classroom for that student as well. So they can have that familiar face who already knows them teaching, and they can see that person now as a leader as well. And so at the moment, 29% are BIPOC staff in this group, which I'm hoping that will just continue to grow as we put more effort behind this. And then just as a kind of out there, we do have 29 teachers that are on out of field permission. So we do have 29 fully licensed teachers that are likely licensed in content areas that are teaching outside of that area and teaching in special education. And so ultimately, what I'm getting at is that we've essentially started to create an alternative licensure pathway here. And our teachers in our tier 1, 2, and out of field, they're being supported in a very special way, because we know it is not easy to be an unlicensed teacher in a classroom, right? When you haven't gone through a prep program to have all those other skill sets. So we support them through mentorship, through due process, specialized training, and then of course we have our amazing innovation coaches that assist them as well. And I would like to point out too that at the state level, what we're seeing is that around 21% of the teachers that have tier 1s and 2s in the state are BIPOC candidates or teachers. And so that percentage may not seem very large, but compared to the percentage of all licenses at the state level, which is 6% teachers, BIPOC teachers, that's huge. So we're seeing this already, kind of back to my point about the systemic inequities here. We're seeing an opportunity that's emerging, and if we can foster it and support it appropriately and grow it, I think that we're going to have something really unique here for 287. So we'll move on to the next slide and move on to the part where I provide some background on this bonus. So the signing and retention bonus was created back in the 16-17 school year, and it originated through the Human Resources Department actually, but it really originated from the idea of learning and collaborating with other districts and states to figure out what incentives are they using to differentiate themselves, and of a need for differentiating 287 from other school districts to attract talent to us. And so we have been doing this bonus for 5 years now. This bonus focuses on licensures, not positions. So again, that high need content area, high need support staff areas that are typically really hard to fill. And so those might look like our autism spectrum that I mentioned earlier, our blind visually impaired, and then the support might look like school psychologists. So I do know that we have some new board members here. So really quickly, I just want to give some context on how this works. So the signing bonus is $3,000. It's paid out over 120 days of their first teaching year with us. And that is not all upfront. So we have about $500 that's paid out upfront when they sign the paperwork and it's on their first paycheck. And then at 90 days and at 120 days, they received the other two halves. So that's about $1,250 each time. And the 120 days, for those that don't know, is what we classify in the state of Minnesota as a full teaching year, which is the reasoning behind that. And that allows for years to count towards tenure. And so with the signing bonus, the staff members have to be full-time, and they have to be licensed in a tier 3 or tier 4 license. So we are not talking about the group that I was just talking about. This is completely separate. We are talking about fully licensed teachers that have graduated from a teacher prep program and earned this full license. And so over the last 5 years, we have had 80 teachers at a 71% retention rate, which is pretty great. And acknowledging the right-hand side of this slide is our BIPOC percentage. So that's 6%. I will say though, all of those staff members have still stayed with us throughout the entire time. So they are not part of the little yellow on the left. We'll move to the next slide. And so the recommendation is to continue the signing and retention bonus for the 2021-2022 school year. You know, as I mentioned earlier, this is a really interesting year for all of us. And we know that this signing and retention bonus has really allowed us to fulfill one of our biggest strategic priorities, which is our student outcomes. And having a fully licensed teacher in front of our students is so important for their outcomes. And so this allows us to do that in some of those really, really hard to fill areas. And so while our hiring volume might be low, it does not mean that we won't have these areas still. And so we do find this still really important. The other piece that I'll mention with this is we are recommending that the board approve to move forward with doing this again. And 287, we've reflected on this, within the HR department, within other leadership groups. And we will be using our racial equity analysis tool to dig in a little bit deeper on this signing and retention bonus and see if there is a way that we can align this with our strategic goal of advancing racial equity, because that 6% we know is not meeting that need at the moment. And so that is really important to us, is one, to continue being able to provide our students with those licenses. And it's also still really important for us to be able to think, let's take a step back, let's relook at this and find a way to align this better. It's meeting one need and we want it to meet both. So that is the goal here. I will say too, at this point, just really quickly, that there has been some legislative action pending action that might allow for some really unique opportunities here as well. There is some hiring bonuses that might be available through some teachers of color and American Indian teacher acts that are going, through at the moment. And we're hoping that those, in combination with our efforts already, might be able to create something really, really effective for shifting our focus to not only that fully licensed, but also that BIPOC population of teachers that we're hoping to get. So I'm hoping that legislation does go through. Next slide. And finally, I just had to mention this. I find retention to be the same effort as recruitment. And I really, they're just kind of blurred together for me. But something I wanted to call out that happened this year is I had the privilege of working in all of our COVID stuff in HR this year. And so I worked on a lot of staff messaging with related to COVID and leaves and all those pieces. Is typically when we are in person, I can walk around the halls and talk to staff and this year I couldn't do that. And so that personal relationships, back to the relationships, is so important to me. And I kind of missed out on that a little bit. I was able to do that through some of my other kind of meetings. But the one way that this really happened, and probably something that's most meaningful for me this year, is I'm actually the staff member that calls the employees when they are a close contact, or if they've notified us that they've tested positive, and talk to them about next steps. What does this mean? How is this going to work? Sending us their results, all those pieces. And the messaging and those phone calls are very tough. They're very tough for staff because there's a level of uncertainty. A lot of times there's fear associated with that news for themselves, for their families. And I've been able to build some really interesting and unique relationships with staff that have been very meaningful, because often I'm just a shoulder to cry on. And so this year has looked very different, but my focus has really been on making sure that staff feel heard, that they feel safe, that they feel comforted in whatever way that I can, because often I can't really do much about it. But that has been so impactful, and it has changed a lot of how my relationships then develop with principals as well. Providing principals with, canned responses that are softened and that are, very sensitive to the situation, so that principals aren't having to go through that effort emotionally to try to respond each and every time to that same question. So providing things like that, knowing all the conversations that I've already had with staff. It's also really, instilled in me the idea that every staff conversation and every staff message is part of retention. It is so important that our staff feel heard and feel that they are safe, and that builds trust, and the trust is what builds retention. And so I will leave you with that. I have had the absolute pleasure of being able to be there for our staff this year in this way, and it's meant a lot to me. So next slide, I will take questions now.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Questions, we will start with Crystal Brecky. Crystal, go ahead, please.
I certainly welcome somebody else to go first if there's another hand raised. I'm always at the beginning.
Well, I can't, the tile configuration right now shows you and not the rest. It'll switch up. I'll get there. So it's fine.
Okay. So Amanda, thank you. I am also somebody who loves reading the teacher supply and demand report. So you and I, we are on the same wavelength, thinking about these things. And so before I ask my question related to that, just also wanted to appreciate that you touched on retention in the time of COVID, because I think obviously the strain and the anxiety that our staff are experiencing is really significant. And I think we should be thinking about retention with what those experiences have been like over the last year and are going to continue to be like in mind. So thank you for that. My question might be very in the weeds, but I know that there is some proposed legislation this year that would change the tiers moving forward and change some of the pathways available for tier 2 teachers in particular to have a long-term path to licensure. And so given how this does disproportionately affect 287 and given the racial equity component that you talked about and I think is pretty well documented, I'm curious if 287 is taking or is thinking about taking a position on some of those proposed changes.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Generally speaking, anytime that I've had access to PELSB on a one-to-one basis, I've been in a couple of work groups with them in the sense of building a lot of that kind of language. And especially when they're asking districts for feedback. So we've had an opportunity to talk to them about where 280 stands on, opening up the door for ensuring that staff can, anyone can really get licensed if they would like to become a teacher. And so that's something that we'll be watching closely and continuing to work with PELSB on. But in terms of, taking a stand in general, I've just been doing it on a one-to-one basis with the staff.
And Jackie, I noticed you did have a hand up. Do you have a question?
No, all I wanted to say is I'm a teacher in my other life. And so I really appreciate you saying every communication and every conversation is retention. I just wanted to highlight that because I think I can speak for most teachers that we haven't felt appreciated or heard for a very long time in society. And so we rely very heavily on being appreciated at work. So I just wanted to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Jackie. And Andrea, your question or comment?
Well, first of all, I certainly agree with what Jackie just said. Thank you. And I want to build on what Crystal said, and maybe plant a seed, Amanda, that the story that you just told us about 287 would really be great for testifying at the legislature when that bill comes up. I think the value in those two tiers for 287, it's so obvious, and the way you kind of bring that to life, giving the examples, could be really powerful. So I'm just going to plant that seed.
Sam, go ahead.
Andrea and Crystal, I just want to say, so noted. This is Michelle Axel. We will take those thoughts back. Thank you.
Thanks. And Sam, your question or comment, go ahead.
My question is regarding the retention with the licensed teachers with those difficult jobs to recruit and retain. You mentioned that 71%. So being that we'd like to see that higher, was it then discussed then to increase that bonus or increase the length of it to try to get that higher?
Thanks, Sam. That's actually a really great question. That's part of, it's part of the pause that comes when we say, and 287 would like to use the racial equity tool and go back and really kind of deep dive and pull this apart a little bit this year. That's definitely part of the conversation that's being considered. I can't speak quite to the financial part of the dollar amount, but more so to the retention part of it. And, what would it look like if it was longer? What does the retention part of this mean for us? How could it look different? Could we collaborate it with other incentives we already have at the district to make it bigger and better? So it's noted and absolutely part of the conversation.
Can someone then speak to the financial aspect of it then, that if the recruiting, the retention is not where we want it to be, why we can't then increase it?
I think we have that opportunity. I think the recommendation on the table is just doing just that this year in review. And if we feel that we might be more successful in those goals by raising it, we can certainly entertain that. Absolutely. It really, in my worldview, it's a small amount of money comparatively to get high quality teachers in front of our kids, because they historically have not had that. So if that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to figure out what to do. But I think this year will give us that deeper dive to look at that and what touch points will be the most effective to get what we want. So great suggestion, then I might remind you of it in the coming votes sometime.
Thank you. We'll hear next from Andrea Keene, followed by Jackie Mosqueda-Jones. Andrea? No? Okay, thank you.
Sorry,
Jackie.
I'm going to lower my hand.
Oh, it's okay. Jackie?
I just wanted to encourage the deeper dive. Just from what I know, retention is less about how much money teachers make and more about how they feel where they're working or how overloaded, or that's my experience and what I've read in the research for retention. So believe me, I'm a teacher. I'm all for more money anytime. And I'm encouraging a deeper dive to make sure what the real, what the real issues are. My teacher of color friends are telling me it's pretty much straight up racism. So that's where we should be concentrating on.
Thank you.
And just in response to that, we know that exists, and actually we're trying right now to do a better job or a more intentional job of speaking to our EAs about that very thing. What do they experience in our district as systemic racism, and what can we do about it organizationally to change that pattern? And that's a conversation we've been trying to start this year, especially with our educational assistants.
Well, if we're talking about assistants, they need more money, period. I mean, I think that's a whole different reason why we lose assistants. That is tied to money.
I hear you.
Thanks. Ruthie, go ahead, please.
That was my question, Jackie. I just wonder, when you say racism, what is the situation? And so you answered my question. It's basically the offering of what they would pay. That's where the racial inequities are in BIPOC versus others. So That's where we see the inequities. What's been offered to them as far as pay as a BIPOC member versus others.
I think because disproportionately we have BIPOC staff in those lower paying positions than in teacher positions, where there would be paid, there's a big discrepancy between what I get paid and what my assistant in my classroom gets paid.
Right, gotcha. So several levels we need to deal with. Getting more teachers, but also dealing with where they're hired, the levels they're hired at. Thank you. That's all I wanted.
Okay. Other questions or comments? This is an action item, so if there's anything else anyone needs to know before the vote, this is a good opportunity. All right. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Michelle and Amanda, and appreciate all of the follow-up questions and comments. Is there a motion to approve the human resources, recruitment and retention strategies as presented?
Andrea, I so move.
We have a motion by Sam Sant. We'll take a second from Andrea Keene. And Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Andreessen.
Aye.
Jackie is an aye. Casey. Aye. Keene.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you, everyone. At this point in the agenda, I'd like to circle back to the Northern Star online video. Thank you for your patience. And Awanim will go ahead and get that set up. And David, is there anything that you'd like to share just as this is queuing up?
I don't think so. I'm just looking forward to any questions.
Sounds good. Thanks.
I am Braden and I'd like to share my NSO experience. NSO has changed my life completely. With one semester, I'm seeing the best grades I've ever seen. I'm the most motivated for school and I have the most hope for my future. All the staff and my teachers have been amazing. It's hard to sum up in a minute and a half what they've done for me, but they have changed my high school career and they have been the most welcoming and best teachers I could have ever asked for. I didn't have much motivation for school before NSO. I didn't have much hope for anything higher than a D. With NSO, I saw honor roll for the first time in 4.5 years. I just have more motivation to do better in my life. I can't really thank everybody at NSO enough that I know it's the teachers and the staff's job, but they put a significant impact on me and just my hopes. So I'm very happy to be able to share that. I'm sorry I couldn't get more in depth with the time, but NSO has changed me for 1,000,000 times better, and I'm forever grateful.
That's success that's worth waiting for.
Yeah.
Thank you. So David, any follow-up comments that you'd like to add, or we can open it up for questions and comments?
Yeah, I think it's, especially this video is impressive because he took some very difficult courses that a lot of students have struggled with in the past. And so to see him come out of that successful, I think it's a testament to him, but also to the continued support of the teachers. Yeah.
Thanks. Any questions or comments for David? Sam, go ahead, please.
Just a quick question. What was the name of the student again?
Braden.
Okay. And Ruthie, do you have a question or comment?
Just wondering, did I miss it? What grade was he in? Is he in?
I believe he's in 10th grade.
Oh, okay. So a couple more years in high school.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you all. This is just always an important part of the board meeting, to be able to hear from students and just appreciate how far they've come. And I know that that is because of the work and the care of all of the staff who are putting this in place. So thank you very much. Sandy?
And I would just, David, if you would just please convey to him our appreciation for him, not only conveying that to you, but conveying it through a video to the school board. That is the best testament we can have. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sandy.
Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. At this point, we are arriving at item 9 on the agenda, which is board business. Our chair report this evening includes a proposed superintendent contract for the 2021-2022 school year. This will be a one-year contract, as Superintendent Lewandowski has shared news of her upcoming retirement at the end of the 21-22 school year. We have certainly benefited from a long and successful tenure with your leadership, Sandy. So I just cannot say, we will have time to celebrate and put this forward. So, but I might dribble this out throughout the year. So just sit tight. I think there's more coming.
Okay.
But at any rate, we've shared this with the board, but I do want to provide an opportunity for questions and comments before this is moved for action. So any questions or comments regarding the superintendent contract? And Ruthie, is your hand up for this one, or is that just the hand up from the last question?
From the last question, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Adam Seidel, go ahead, please.
Let me lower my hand there. Sure. And maybe I should wait until after the motion to do this, but I guess I'll just go now because you asked for questions and comments. I've informed Superintendent Lewandowski of this as well, and I've informed Regina as well. I just want to let the board. I'm about to vote no on this contract, and I want people to understand why. And most importantly, I want people to understand that it is not a reflection of my strong opinion on Superintendent Lewandowski, nor I'm not questioning her continued capability to lead the district, nor her commitment that this 0.75 represents any kind of slide off of her commitment to the district, which is strong. I do feel, though, that it was my understanding at the last meeting that when I and a couple other board members brought up sort of, frankly, concerns with I'm not aware of any other districts our size or our complexity with a structure like this. And it was my understanding that this MSBA workshop that we have planned later this month was to discuss that and discuss that issue and get an understanding of what other organizations have done this and how it's gone, and to avoid any pitfalls, because I do see a lot of potential pitfalls. So I was really surprised when we got this contract on Monday. It's just not, it's not what I had expected. I had a chance to talk to Regina about this, and so we talked it out. But both she and I have looked around a little bit to try and find some examples of that information that I was hoping to discuss as a board, and wasn't really able to find it. Didn't look at it in a whole board way. Obviously, just try to find a few things. Wasn't really able to find it, and so given that, I just don't feel comfortable moving forward because I don't feel like I have enough information on. Ultimately, I just think it's a really difficult job, and it takes somebody really great to do it, and it takes 100% of them. And I just need more information to feel like I'm comfortable going away from that. So I don't feel comfortable voting for it, but I wanted the board to understand why.
And thank you for sharing that, Adam. As he shared, he and I have had the opportunity for some discussion on this point. And a couple of the items that I shared is that there was, I apologize for any misunderstanding, the flyer on the MSBA workshop that has been shared does not cover superintendent contract. That's not the intent of the workshop. So that's not a possibility for a discussion during that particular session. But I can understand how there could potentially be some confusion there. I have some additional thoughts that I would share on this, but I'd also like to hear from other board members first. So Crystal, I would invite you to share your question or comment.
Sure. I just wanted to say I totally understand and appreciate Adam's concern and think it's valid, and would not try to convince him otherwise. I think that, we got a high-level outline of how some responsibilities and duties are anticipated to be shifted in the next year. And I think it was helpful. And for me, I think this is something that we are going to have to be keeping a very close eye on in terms of impact for Sandy, in terms of impact for her team, in terms of impact for our staff and our students. And so I think it's helpful to have it mapped out. But as Adam said, this is not something that is common. This is not something that is necessarily going to be easy for anyone. And so I think we as a board are going to need to be responsible for really following up and following through on the implementation of this and the impact that it has on our people.
Thank you, Crystal. We'll hear next from Andrea Keene. Andrea, thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks, Regina. First of all, I do want to also thank Adam. One of my school boarding pet peeves is a no vote with no explanation. It always makes me go like this, like, why? So thank you for your explanation, and I totally respect it. I also want to share that I am going to vote yes. I think that 287 really does a great job carrying out their mission of being innovative. And I think just in my experiences watching, for example, things that have happened when we've been on get on the bus activities, to see the flexibility and the adaptability of the leaders in the district. I mean, I think some of us on this board have watched the leadership team tag team in real time during things that have happened while we've been in the buildings. And so I'm voting yes with a high level of confidence that through Sandy's leadership and also just the great teamwork and innovation I've seen on the team, that I believe they can pull it off.
Thank you, Andrea. Additional questions or comments?
I just want to say I'm in agreement with Andrea because I haven't been on the board that long, but just looking at the high quality staff that's on board and what they produce and come forth with so far, it's amazing. And I think having a high caliber superintendent that this district has to try to honor what's going to be more flexible for her as opposed to just leaving altogether. I think we have to consider that too. She could just say, no, I don't want to do a part-time deal and leave. So I appreciate that, her being willing to stay on another year. My question is the other staff, was this, did you take time to negotiate this out with them? I'm quite sure you did, to come up with the type of duties and the amount that you've allotted to each one. I did think that we were going to have a discussion on this draft before moving into actually approving it, the contract itself. But I'm okay with, going along with the part-time setup with her, just by seeing what has been produced by the current staff now. My other concern is how long will it take another superintendent before the ending of this contract, because that takes time too. And MSBA they offer sessions or workshops on hiring superintendents. So I don't know whether anyone looked into that to see whether that's a possibility. So we can compare all ends of it as far as what goes into it and the type of contract we have now. Should we look into those aspects before approving this current contract?
Thank you for the questions, Ruthie. I'm going to address some of them, and I would invite Sandy to share comments as appropriate to fill in where I'm not necessarily able to. In terms of the contract, the presentation of this contract, it was shared with us at our January 28th board meeting. So we did have the opportunity that was the first presentation of it. So that would be our customary amount of time. And just for context, we are certainly, if this is for July 1 of 20 2021. There is some time left before approval would be imminent. Our pattern is to approve a little bit earlier. A year ago, we approved this in the fall. So it's we've been on a one-to-one contract for a little bit of time. And so this is a little bit later than that particular schedule, but I appreciate the questions and comments because this is an opportunity for discussion. In terms of MSBA workshop, we are going to have one February 25th, and that one is on hiring the right superintendent. So that's looking forward to our focus as a board on that transition process for hiring the next person, but it is not set up to address the existing superintendent contract. There are other MSBA, I believe they've offered other workshops on just negotiations in general and superintendent contracts. We have not looked into that in particular. What we are currently engaged to discuss with them is what do we need to know as a board in order to move forward. I also want to address your question, Ruthie, about, and Adam addressed this as well. It's a really good question. When will we have another superintendent? We don't know. That is up to us as a board. How are we going to shape that process? I'm sure that in our own home districts, we've experienced different paths in that process. Sometimes it happens in just a few months. Sometimes it can happen over a longer period of time, or there may be an interim superintendent involved. So there are many different ways that districts take to appointing that position. So this is something that we will discuss as a board before we move forward. And it's a little bit of where we are in terms of discussing with the staff how the 0.25 distribution of duties would occur. We haven't approved the contract yet. So it doesn't mean that our staff isn't always planning, because they're really good at that. So our lead team is always anticipating, moving ahead, and it's one of their great strengths. It's a reason that I have so much confidence that this is possible. It's because of the depth of experience and leadership with our key administrative personnel, that they are able to do it. But we are in a little bit of an area that is just that transition where the board hasn't formally said, yes, this is what we're going to do. So that does impact a little bit of how far we can go. But Sandy, I would invite you to, if you can address anything for better clarification.
Yeah, I think I'd address the question of distribution, of sharing of duties, if you will. Really fortunate and grateful to have 5 of our top leaders in the district who quickly offered to help once they heard about this tentative plan. And I'm grateful for that. They're all high-level administrators. And we've also had, I think, 2 or 3 discussions now around the distribution, trying to sort it out. I'm sure there would be more on an ongoing basis to just try to keep that clarity. But we have experienced top leaders, and they were very generous in offering to help and help sort that out.
Thank you. And Ruthie, does that help? Is there anything that you referenced that we have not addressed yet?
No, not at this time.
Thanks. And I noticed, Michelle, you have a hand up, and then we'll go to Sam. So Michelle, go ahead, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I was not surprised to see an innovative draft contract come through. Sandy's been working in a very innovative way for quite a few years now, and specifically not taking raises and staying on. And I must say, the idea of Sandy leaving this July after the year that we've had up till now, and will continue to have problems, really scares me for the district. And so I endorse what's been proposed, as long as Sandy is comfortable with that. We've known that when she's been on vacation or whatnot, things have been planned out, people are in place. And the only concern I would have is if Sandy, you work more than the 75% because anything you do, you give 100+++%. So I do urge you to take those vacations when the skies are clear. So for going away. So thank you, Sandy, for coming forward with a very innovative 287 style proposal.
Thank you, Michelle. Sam, go ahead, please.
When I first got on this board, I was under the impression that Superintendent Lewandowski was going to retire at the end of this school year. And seeing, that presenting this new contract, I think it's great because it buys us time as a district. And it also creates an opportunity. I feel at this 0.75, it's just like, typically we do, we're working for the state or in our home district, like a phased retirement type of a plan. And I see this as an opportunity for us to, when we get a new superintendent, to help them get mentored by Superintendent Lewandowski. So I do support this. And I'm also going to press them that we will hire a new superintendent by March 31st of next year. So they would have opportunity to work under Superintendent Lewandowski for that mentorship before she fully retires.
Thank you. And I think that the note on, when we offer that contract to a new superintendent is one that I've got it written down. It's something for us to discuss as a full board and figure out what kind of timeline does that represent. So thank you. And that's all helpful as we start to shape that next phase. Additional questions or comments? Sandy, go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I could just convey to the board, I think the same thing I conveyed to the chair when we first talked about this is my goal or my wish is to do whatever is best for the district, what the board decides is the best. I obviously have passion for the district. I also have some passion for a little more time personally, and so whatever the board decides, I can live with, trust me.
I don't know if we can live without that.
If we decide you can't go.
That's right. Well, we might decide that that's what's best. I do want to just emphasize how grateful I am for the conversations I've had with Superintendent Lewandowski, with individual board members as they have posed questions. This has provided a rich opportunity for additional perspectives. A great strength of being an intermediate is that we have 11 different scenarios on how this can work. And just imagine, that's a depth of experience that is incredibly valuable. So I have confidence in our board. I have never doubted Sandy Lewandowski's commitment to our kids. I have never doubted it. And I believe that our kids are better off with her caring and her compassion. But what leads that, and this is my own experience with the district and with Sandy's leadership, is her true commitment to race inequity and trauma-informed practice. It is one thing to say that we care about kids. It's another thing to identify, here's what makes a difference. And Sandy is moving this district in a better direction. And I appreciated all of the items that she outlined on how a 0.75 distribution of duties might look. But one comment that she included is that she would retain 100% leadership of the race and equity piece. So I want to point that out. To me, that speaks volumes. I also want to point out our superintendent evaluations, which are conducted annually more than once. And I'd have to go back to see if this is every one of them. It's possible, but more than once, it's been encouraged that Sandy certainly take care of herself, recognizing the demands of this job and the reality that data suggests superintendents in Minnesota have a tenure of about 3 to 5 years, and this will be year 16. So for Sandy, so for 287, we have had that incredible benefit. And I alluded to this earlier, but I also their comment about the confidence in our leadership team, because Sandy has built a strong team. And I know what this team can do. They are innovative. They are leaders. They have a depth of education, licensure, experience, and dedication to the district. So for those reasons, I am comfortable with this particular contract. But at this point in time, I would like to invite a motion to approve the contract.
So moved.
Moved by Sam Sant. Is there a second?
Second by Ruthie Dallas.
Oh, seconded by Ruthie Dallas. And is there any additional, are there any additional questions or discussion before we move forward for action? Hearing none, I would invite board members to unmute and for Crystal to please call the roll.
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
No.
Motion carries with one dissent. So we will move forward with this contract. And Sandy, I do want to thank you, and I do want to take this opportunity to thank all of our lead team who will be supporting our 2021-22 school year. So thank you. Now we move on to information items on the agenda. I mentioned earlier that at our next meeting on February 25th, our regular board meeting will be followed by a workshop. This is a board workshop at which we will have a presentation by the Minnesota School Board Association titled Hiring the Right Superintendent, and the flyer about the points that will be covered on this workshop has been shared with the board. Next, is there any AMSD report this evening?
I do have a report, Chair.
Thank you. Andrea, go ahead.
And I also might want to confirm, I think we've had some changes in people who attend AMSD. Casey, are you no longer attending?
That's correct. I'll be there as a sub when Colin needs me to, but Colin Cox will be our new representative from St. Louis Park.
So did I see this lady? Oh, do you want to take turns?
No, I will follow your lead because I have attended precisely one AMSD board meeting at this point in time.
And Ruthie, are you still going to be at AMSD?
Yeah, I've always been an alternate though.
Great.
But I try to make all the meetings.
We'll figure all that out. Okay, I'll be quick. The Board of Directors meeting was held on Friday, February 5th on Zoom. We had two guest speakers, both chair people of education committees. We had Jim Davney from the House, DFL, and then we had Roger Chamberlain, Republican from the Senate. Senator Chamberlain talked about the priorities of the Senate Education Committee. They are get kids back in school, literacy, mental health, increasing the number of people of color, and getting social media out of the schools. He supports referendum equalization. And he is not a fan of ideas to mitigate funding losses caused by enrollment drops because of COVID. He thinks summer school is important, but he also thinks it's difficult in a state where we rely on tourism and need high school workers for the economy. When asked about the education constitutional amendment, he said, I'm just going to quote him because it's the most clear. He said, "I hate it because it's just for making lawyers rich." So he does not hold back on his opinions. Then we heard from Representative Davney, who's the chair of the House Education Finance Committee. He said that the House education priorities are pandemic relief, racial disparities, discipline equity, and responding to the needs of students, including a bill to hold districts harmless after enrollment drops. He talked about how the school's critical plan in the community has been made clear by the pandemic. He also supports equalization, but thinks it should be addressed in the tax committee, not the education committee. He talked about how our solutions need to be student-focused and relevant for students, including CTE pathways, and moving some bills quickly so that districts know how much funding will be available for critical summer programming. When he was asked about the education constitutional amendment, he was not willing to state a position because he hasn't seen the language for this session, and he thinks it might change from last session. So the next item on the agenda then was the approval of the AMSD session brief on the constitutional amendment. And I can tell you that this session brief position paper has been in the works for a year with multiple opportunities for all board members and superintendents to provide feedback and input. I think it's really good. Nobody wants to say they're against it because we all want to do better by all of our kids in the state. So I think the AMSD position brief does offer support and ideas for improvement. And I hope that that could be helpful, because something that I really didn't even realize until we started talking about it last week is that Justice Alan Page and Neil Kashkari have created this amendment and the language. But if it does get taken up into the legislative process, and it has a bill in the House and the Senate, at that point, any amendments can be made to the language by anyone on either side of the aisle. And Alan Page and Neil Kashkari basically kind of lose control of the language, which I think makes the AMSD session brief even more important, because if there are ways that we as education leaders think we can make the language stronger, we may have that opportunity. The last thing I'll say about that is last week on Thursday, Carrie Miller had an entire show on that on NPR. If you Google it, you could listen to that. I thought it was really great. Talked about the pros and the cons. Neil Kashkari was a guest. It was really helpful. And then finally, Scott Kroonquist just gave his executive director report, an update on the session. It's in full swing. The governor has released his budget. House and Senate won't work on their proposals until after the February forecast comes out. The governor also presented his Due North plan, which shares many of the recommendations and ideas from the school funding work group, as well as all the work done by all of our communities to create the Reimagine Minnesota plan. So that's nice to see. I think that's about, AMSD does an annual budget survey to try to gather data to support legislative priorities. This year, because there are so many concerns about the budget, AMSD is partnering with MASBO and MSBA to get a more comprehensive statewide data set. So that is happening presently, and so stay tuned for those results. I think that's it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments.
Thank you, Andrea. Any questions or comments? Sam?
Andrea, last week, there's a report that came out regarding that constitutional amendment that they're proposing, that they had reviewed 13,000 legal cases, and none of them seem to pose any threat to this constitutional amendment. What's AMSD's stance on that? Is that true? Or I know with attorneys, they'll find some loophole somewhere or another eventually.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I can't answer that question specifically, but I'd be more than happy to give you my opinion, which is I also read that over, and a couple of questions I had were how they could come up with those conclusions when the education amendments in each state are not the same. They're all very different. In fact, if you listen to Neil Kashkari, he'll compare us a lot to Florida and say, why is Florida making all this great progress after the amendment? And, you know, Minnesota is doing terribly. But what he doesn't say is that if you dig into the Florida Education Constitutional Amendment, you'll see that class sizes and guaranteed universal pre-K paid for by the state is in their constitution. So it's no wonder that they've made progress. That language is not in the Minnesota version of the amendment. So I think you have to be careful to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. And that's just my personal editorial. I'm sure there's so much I don't know, but I had that same question, Sam.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you to our AMSD team. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Andrea, for tonight's update. Just a reminder that we have a local 2209 virtual breakfast, BYOB, bring your own bacon. And that's on Tuesday, February 23rd at 7:00 a.m. So if anyone would like to attend that, and I encourage all board members to join, please let Juanine know so that she can send you a link. Is there anything anyone would like to share from once around the table? All right, with that, I would ask for a motion to adjourn this evening. Is there a motion?
So moved, Madam Chair, Michelle Kuntz.
Moved by Michelle Kuntz. Is there a second?
Second, Adam. It's Heidi Marty with the second.
Yes.
Okay. Seconded by Heidi Marty, but thank you both. And Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Andreessen.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Mosqueda Jones.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.